Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for joining this live stream. In this chat I'd like to talk about Taiwan. It's sort of kind of been in the news recently. China is, communist China is doing a lot of huffing and puffing about Taiwan and how it's part of China and that sort of thing, and anyone that gets in the way of China's claims there is going to get slapped about and so on. So it's pretty bellicose and very warlike rhetoric that's coming out of China at the moment. So let's just have a little look at Taiwan and the history and get some idea as to the basis for communist China's claims. Now, China has a view that when China was at its most powerful, so say, around 1500 or thereabouts, in the earlier 1500s, when China was at its most powerful, the zenith of its powers, then that is the proper status for China in the world. So China at its most powerful 600 or so years ago, they want to imagine they can return to that time when China was feared and respected, and everyone kowtowed, which is like banging your forehead on the stone floor. People kowtowed to the Chinese heavies and to the Chinese emperor. The Chinese viewed themselves as being what they called the Middle Kingdom. So effectively, it was the centre point of the universe. Now, it was probably takes a fair bit of chutzpah to look at yourself in that way, but other empires have sort of fallen to that sort of hubris in the past, so they're possibly not unique there necessarily. But the second thing they talk about rejuvenation, and what they mean is going back to that time when they were top dogs. And now the world's sort of moved on in the 6 years. You could have the Italians could get up and say, well, we want to go back to the days when the Roman Empire was top dog. Now, talking about it and doing it are two completely different things. And why? Because an empire was great thousands of years ago or many hundreds of years ago, why they're entitled to return to that position or that status is well, anybody's guess. It's a nice dream to have, or an aspirational, but you've got to deliver in terms of the real world and on the ground, and some people doubt that China has that capability today. So that's one side. The other side is that the Chinese government, at least, has a view of what they refer to, or what they see rather, as the Chinese wider diaspora. So wherever around Asia Chinese people are, then that is part of Greater China in their view, which of course includes Taiwan in this. So they could theoretically, using the diaspora argument and the cultural argument, they could say, well, the whole of Asia, maybe with the exception of Japan, but the whole of Asia is part of Greater China, and they better bow down before us. So these two arguments they're putting forward are sort of running in parallel. The third, and one that's equally important, is China perceived that it was a powerful, cultured nation until the damn white devils turned up, which was the early days, was Dutch traders, Portuguese traders, and later on French, British, German, and so on. So they perceived that they were humiliated by these European powers, who are far more technologically advanced. They were humiliated by these powers, and that humiliation is a scab and a wound that they won't stop scratching at, and that they believe needs vigorous, if not military, redress. So these things are all running in parallel, and they teach in school what they refer to as the 100 years of humiliation, which is roughly sort of say 1830 to 1949. So it's about that time period, and they refer to that as 100 years of humiliation, when China was in a state of internal turmoil, and when not so much that they were, hugely hard done by the Europeans, but that they had to negotiate with the Europeans, where the Europeans had the better technology, and the Chinese were not driving it and deciding and telling the Europeans. So the fact that any outside power could sort of tell them what to do or dictate terms or anything like that, that was considered the humiliation that, again, hasn't been forgotten. And kids are taught about it in school, for goodness sakes. And I've been on the receiving end of it in my business travels. I remember being accosted by it was either a senior high school kid or a first year uni student, and in his pretty ordinary English, he marched up to me on a train I was on in Asia, and he just sort of screamed at me that the days of the white man are over, and we're going to be in charge now, so you guys better watch out. So you'll wonder how worked up he was by the propaganda about bad white devils and so on. So anyway, that's sort of the landscape that we're looking at here as we consider the various issues. Now, coming to Taiwan at the time now, when China has gone into various states of civil war. In fact, they frequently do it, where there's all sorts of disunity and all sorts of internal dissent. Various warlords and factions decide they're going to go to war with each other and in various alliances, and it's quite chaotic and very fluid, and it's been that way for a lot of China's history. So during these times, this is when the Europeans showed up, and the island of Taiwan, which was run by various warlords on and off, hadn't been really controlled by any central government for a while. So the Dutch and the Portuguese and the Spanish came along and pretty much took control of the island. Then there was again the period of local warlords and so on, taking control of the island intermittently over a couple of hundred years. So over the last, say 550 years, Taiwan's been directly controlled by the central government for maybe 100 years of that, if that. It's hard to disentangle, when a warlord's in control and tells the central government to get lost and runs it as a personal fiefdom, whether or not you could call that sort of Chinese central government control. I would say no, but I'm open to discussion on that one. Then in 1895, the Japanese annexed Taiwan, and they named it Formosa, and they controlled that until 1945. Now, during the 1930s, in fact through to 1949, China was in a state of civil war between the communists, who were supported by the Soviet Union, the communists, and what were called the nationalists. Now, the nationalists were horribly corrupt, as China is today, horribly corrupt, and some would say they deserved to lose the civil war and the communists to take over. The communists were a bit more understanding of the peasants, at least till they got power, when that understanding seemed to disappear fairly quickly. But the nationalist government, which had been in effect the government of China, the nationalist government was kicked out in 1949. Now in 1945, after the end of the Second World War, when the Japanese lost control of the island, the nationalist government took control. So from 1945 to 1949, the nationalists were controlling. And then in 1949, the Chinese Civil War ended, and then the nationalist government was kicked out of mainland China and went to Taiwan, and then declared Taiwan to be a separate state. So that's it. So it's remained a separate state, certainly in the eyes of the nationalist government at least, since 1945, and again reiterating since 1949. So it's been an independent nation in that sense, at least for close on 70 years. Now, as China's power in mainland communist China's power has increased because American jobs and Western jobs have been sent over there, so they've got a sudden sort of sugar hit of financial power that otherwise they wouldn't have had. They've dusted off all their dreams of what they call rejuvenation, that they're going to now be the big king daddies in the world, and they're going to demand respect, and anyone gives them back chat is going to get slapped around, and anyone that gets in the way of this rejuvenation and this they're reclaiming what they would see as their natural position at the apex of everything, then so this is what they're using as the arguments to say, well, Taiwan in fact belongs to China as a part of the diaspora, and because it was part of China one time long ago. Now, those arguments I think are tenuous, but look, that's what they're putting forward, and that's the basis for the conflict. Now, if Communist China controls Taiwan, they also have pretty much direct control of all the shipping lanes and seaways through Southeast and Mid and even North Asia for that matter. And there are some who think that's maybe not such a good idea, and they'd rather that those sea lanes and that area be open and available to anybody who wants to use it in terms of international waters and so on. So that's the background to the whole thing, and why it's turning into an unpleasant situation, or potentially unpleasant. Now, as a final comment, there's quite a few commentators are saying that China is economically in a position of starting to stumble. The wider ramifications of the COVID thing, China's less than prudent lending and real estate practices are now coming home to sort of roost, and they're about to have a substantial economic convulsion. Now, I don't know if that's so or not. There are arguments for and against that make it both plausible and implausible depending on who you're listening to. But so the backstory is that as China's about to suffer an implosion, the Chinese Communist Party leadership is looking for a diversion, and the great diversion is to have some sort of military conflict to try and unite the people behind Chinese rejuvenation. But if you listen to the rhetoric coming out of the mouths of the president of China and also the heavies, then it sounds rather defensive. It sounds like they're grasping at possible life rafts to cover for what may be difficult domestic situation that's upcoming and about to arrive. And I'm sure they're desperately trying to stave that off. But I think they're wanting a fallback position where if things do fall to pieces, they can go saber rattling about warfare, and these Western white devils are preventing our proper place in the sun, and so on and so forth. So that's where it's heading, and that's my take on things. You've been with Tacitus today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.